This is Chapter 7, the section of Chapter 7 that focuses on quiz number 2, and this is Physical Development and Health in Early Childhood. And so let's take a look at the changing body in early childhood. So here's a 2-year-old, and you can see that they have a little bit of a tummy because their abdominal muscles are not strong yet. As soon as they turn to age 3, you're going to see that they don't have that tummy anymore, and they're taller and slimmer. Age 4, and then age 5. So when we talk about the brain grows most rapidly between the ages of 2 and 5. And in fact, children's brain development is really accelerated, and it's an important thing to focus on when we focus on health. Children add an average of 2 to 3 inches in height each year and 5 pounds in weight each year. They lose their body fat, as we saw in the pictures, and they get taller and slimmer, and they have a more balanced physique, and girls mature faster than boys. During preschool or early childhood, the prefrontal cortex is one of the focuses of brain development, and the skill development is executive functions, which are they're able to carry out more deliberate actions. They use more conscious strategies in being successful in achieving their goals. They can use more effective decision-making processes and problem-solving skills. And so some examples of how executive function works in early childhood. So their working memory, they're able to follow a longer sequence of directions. And here, this adult has given the child 3 directions. And so if that doesn't quite work, though, you want to maybe scale back to lesson 3 and work on 2. They're able to use inhibition skills. Your turn is up, Michael, so please let Chloe have a turn. And so they're working on that. And children vary in their abilities to do that, and we have to be patient and realize it's a developmental process. And then shifting. They can do more pretending to be something else themselves and more planning in regards to that. So in sociodramatic play, they might say to each other, now you be the baby and I'll be the mama. So providing structure and organization in a child's environment can aid them in the development of executive function, and having a routine that is consistent so they know what to expect and what they're supposed to do can help them be more organized and develop those skills. So when we're looking at brain development and the risks that might come with that, there are cumulative risks. And the strongest predictor of executive function is a composite of factors such as family income, and that's directly related to the amount of resources a family has, like their access to medical care and healthy food and safe housing, the marital status of the parents, environmental stress, if parents are depressed, if they're using substances, so substance abuse, if there's not enough food, or if there are health problems within the family. When we talk about gross or large motor skills, by 2 to 2.5, children learn to walk efficiently. After walking is learned, then they develop more sophisticated movement skills like running, hopping, skipping, climbing, throwing, catching, kicking. And so it's a progressive and small step process of development. So let's take the stages of kicking. So stage 1 is the child exhibits a straight-legged kicking that's minimally coordinated with the rest of their body. They're just using their leg. In stage 2, they begin to flex their leg when they're kicking prior to the contact with the ball. In stage 3, they increase and add hip movement with their leg movement prior to kicking, and then they have a greater range of leg motion, so they follow through. And you'll notice that she's also using her arms as she's kicking. And so finally, the mature form of kicking can be seen by about ages 6 to 8. And so you can see there's a lot more follow through with the leg. So it's a progressive that you can see takes a while to develop those skills. So one of the things that happens in physical development is ossification of the bone. And in the beginning, prenatally, a lot of bone structures are actually more like cartilage near the joints because that flexibility is needed in the birthing process so that they can, and in prenatal development because they have to be in a small space. And so as they develop, as they grow and develop, that cartilage-like bone is replaced with ossified bone, which is harder. And so while that process is going on, the joints are very vulnerable to injuries. So the adults need to make sure that when they're moving a young child from place to place or picking them up, that they need to do that by the trunk of their body and not by their arms or their legs, because that can damage joints. And so we should never pick a child up by their hands or swing them by their arms. You can still swing them, but do that holding them by the trunk of their body. Nor should we hold them upside down by the ankles and do tick-tock, tick-tock, because that's going to affect the joints in their ankles and to some extent their hips. And so here you see some x-rays, and unfortunately they're not the best, but you can see the first one on the left. You can see how much distance there is between the joints in the hands and fingers at 5 weeks, at 1 year, at 4 years, and unfortunately we can't see very well the fingers in the 6-year-old, but you can definitely see the fingers as they attach to the hand that's closed in, and ossification has progressed. But the whole entire process really doesn't fully develop until they're young adults. So looking at sleep, toddlers ages 1 to 2 sleep about 12 to 14 hours a day with one nap of 1 to 3 hours. And by ages 3 to 5, they sleep less. Sleeping difficulties begin to appear between the ages of 2 and 5. And some of those happen because the child's afraid they're going to miss something, or they've been overstimulated, or they have certain fears. And so the job of adults is to help them solve that problem by, if they're overstimulated, stepping activity and stimulation back to help them relax, or if they have a fear like a a monster under the bed, help them develop some skills to deal with that, like should we leave a nightlight on, should we leave the door open to the bedroom, rather than disregarding their fears. That means that you're not assisting them in solving their problems, and you're indicating to them that their fear is insignificant and they shouldn't be feeling that, but they're still going to feel it after you say that. So be respectful of developmental issues. Here is the National Sleep Foundation survey. And here we're looking at the percent of children ages 3 to 5 manifesting the problems on the left-hand side. And then the problems include stalling before bedtime, and you can see that's the most common problem. 50%. Actively resisting going to bed is the next. Snoring is one, and that's really a health issue that needs to be addressed. Having trouble falling asleep is the next one. Bedwetting. Had persistent nightmares or fears, and then nightmares. And we missed breathing problems. That's apnea is another health issue along with snoring. So looking at diseases in early childhood, health recommendations for young children include regular medical checkups, continuing immunizations, making sure you're following through with those, and making sure that you're helping them take care of their teeth and increasing their abilities to be more independent with that. Children average 7 to 10 colds every year. Children that are attending preschool or childcare centers tend to get more in the beginning, but that will decrease as they get older. And few children die of infectious diseases in the United States, and part of that is because of immunizations. In regards to safety, accidents are the most common source of injuries or death among children 11 years and younger in the United States and other industrialized countries, and they occur more often in children under the age of 5. And part of that is they just don't know the boundaries or the possibilities of what could happen to them. Fatal injuries are rare. Most involve accidents followed by birth defects and homicides at ages 1 to 4. And so this chart tells us about emergency room visits, and the orange-ish bar is ages 1 to 4, and then the blue is ages 5 to 14. And you can see that falls are the most common by far, and that is for ages 1 to 4, but it's much more common than with 5 to 14, but falls are still the most common emergency room visits. And then struck or hit by something or someone. And that's less for young children probably because they're more closely monitored and less independent. Natural or environmental issues, why they went to the emergency room, motor vehicle or traffic accidents, being cut or pierced, equally were motor accidents and being cut or pierced between the two age groups. And then poison is more common with younger children and far less common with elementary and young adolescents. So environmental hazards, children are more vulnerable to the dangers of environmental hazards than adults. And part of that is their bodies are smaller, and so they can't tolerate toxins as much. An estimated 9% of young children are exposed to significant levels of secondhand smoke. And because of that, they have increased incidence of infections in the lower respiratory tract, bronchitis, pneumonia, middle ear infections or diseases, SIDS, that's a risk factor for sudden infant death syndrome, respiratory symptoms, and more recently, it's been found to be related to tooth decay. Lead is another danger for young children. Small amounts of lead in the bloodstream of young children are associated with nervous system damage, deficits in IQ, memory, and problem-solving tests, and attentional or behavioral difficulties. About 3% of children in the United States have dangerously high levels of lead in their blood, and about 6% of African Americans have that issue. And this can possibly be because of areas where they live. Lead appears to cause permanent harm in the brain, and this can be compounded by poverty and a poor diet.